that if you put a question in the chat, we're probably going to miss it. So if you have a question you need answering, can you please put it in the separate question and answer box, Q&A box, and that way we'll get around to answering them. It's going to be quite tough if we try to catch up with stuff on the chat box by the looks of it.
Yeah. Right. So a little bit, something else to add in terms of housekeeping, in addition to what David has already mentioned, your microphone and cameras are off, okay, because there are so many of you. In the chat box, please select everyone, okay, so we can all benefit from your comments and ideas. And as David mentioned, please use the Q&A when you have questions. So we make sure we don't miss them. The session is being recorded and you will receive the link to the replay in a follow-up email in a few days, okay, towards mid-May. We will be sharing links throughout the session. Hopefully they will be useful for you. So keep an eye on the chat. And we will also share a handout with those links at the end of the session. Please take some time at the end to complete the survey. We would love to hear your feedback, your ideas, so we can make future sessions more productive and useful for you. So with that, I think we're going to get started. There was a question about the duration. We are going to try to answer all your questions in 45 minutes. So as you can imagine, we will not be able to go into a lot of detail, but we will try to at least put you in the right direction with links or resources if we cannot give you the details of the answer. We have divided the session into 4 blocks based on your questions. So thank you very much for sending those. We are going to start with getting ready for exam day, so a bit prep for the exam. One of the first questions we received had to do with how to improving your vocabulary. So this is already showing that you are aware of one of the key aspects of learning a language. So how can we improve our vocabulary? First, try to access as much English content as possible. So we're very lucky. English gives us the opportunity to access content worldwide because there is so much content in English. So TV series, films, podcasts, books, articles. There is a lot, so please try to access it as much as possible, considering your level, of course. When you are doing that, pay attention to new vocab or grammar and think of how you can use it when you are speaking or writing. Practice different ways of learning new vocabulary. Find the strategy that works for you. If it's a mind map, if you prefer to have a list of words based on topics, word class, whatever works best for you. And here, David, you've been sharing, I think, a very useful strategy for learning new vocabulary and revisiting the vocabulary that you have come across. So do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, I used to ask my students to have a relatively small notebook for their vocabulary, which they could carry in a pocket or in their bag. And then whenever they had 5 spare minutes, they were waiting for the bus or between classes or in the queue for the dining room or whatever, they could take out their vocabulary book and just read through it. So however they had chosen to record their vocabulary, there are lots of different ways to record vocabulary. Obviously, you've got some on the screen here. They could then just read through, and by constantly reading through the same lists, it actually helped them to interiorize the vocabulary without spending time trying to forcefully memorize the vocabulary that they had to learn. They were learning it just by constant contact with it. So it was really quite an easy way of getting extra vocabulary.
Hmm. Yeah, and just in addition to revisiting that vocabulary, try to, as I said, like use this new vocabulary when you're writing and when you are speaking, and see if it is helping you to communicate or you have to make small changes, so it works. Okay, you are not going to get it right the first time. That's probably the most probable option, right? But ask your teacher for feedback, ask your classmates, your friends for feedback, and see how you can make these small changes. So this new structure, this new grammar helps you to communicate better and more effectively. Then you also asked us about how to improve listening, and I added how to improve reading as well. Can I check what is, in your opinion, the most challenging skill for you? Reading from Marine, listening, writing, use of English. Okay. Right, thank you for this. So I think it is clear that it depends on the person, right? So there is no clear skill that may be more problematic than others. Maybe it also depends on the level. But we need to try to identify like our strengths and also our areas of improvement. And if we want to work especially on listening and reading the receptive skills, it is still a good idea to engage with material. Please try to use material which is suitable, which is at the right level, so quality material. So you know that you are practicing at the right level of ability. Here on the screen, you can see a screenshot of our website, Learning English, where you can have a selection of activities. You can choose the skill, the level, and the time that you've got available, and you can do little activities for you to have some practice. Then try to listen to text with different speakers and a variety of topics and accents. The range becomes wider as you go up the language ladder, right? So when you are approaching B2 and C1, you have to think of a wider variety of topics. And this is true for listening, and it's also true for reading. Okay, so think about different text types and also different topics. Then also become aware of the importance of different reading and listening soft skills. Okay, very often we hear that, you know, I didn't have the time to do the reading paper, the reading and use of English paper, because the texts were so long. And it is designed on purpose. Okay, this is what needs to happen, because when you are, think about your mother tongue, when you are reading in Italian, in Spanish, in German, in French, you sometimes you read quickly because you want to get a general idea of what the text is about. Sometimes you want to read slowly and very carefully because you want to understand specific information there, and you want to understand everything there. So you need to do that in real life, and our exams need to replicate that in the exam. Okay, so that's why the time is limited, and you have little time, because you will have to decide when you have to read quickly and when it's time to read a bit more slowly. Okay, and this becomes increasingly more important towards B2 and C1. So this is not something that we do naturally in our mother tongue, not so much when we are in a foreign language. So please ask your teacher for guidance so they can give you practice in those different sub skills. And then David, another question, which is I think a winner in terms of the questions we are asked. We need to understand everything.
No, no, you never need to understand everything. In fact, I think most of the time, even when we read in our own native language, our own first language, we don't consciously understand everything that we're reading. Quite often, we actually predict what we think we should be reading, which can be a problem for people if the writer has written something else, obviously. But no, you don't need to understand every word. And in fact, if a word is particularly complex, it's probably not the answer. Although obviously that's very relative when we come to talk about C1. But if it's a really difficult word, it's probably the answer is probably not specifically counting on that word. What you should do, of course, is look at the context of the word from the words around it and make sure that you understand the general idea. Okay. It's very important that the students realize they don't need to understand every word because there is still a tendency, less at B2 and C1, obviously, because they have other reading skills, or should have. But there is still a tendency to come across a word that you don't know and panic. And so, the idea of being able to judge what a word probably means by the context is really important. And that's something that you can do very easily in class.
Yep. And I think that also gives you perhaps more confidence and you feel safer, when you are dealing with texts, knowing that, as David is saying, that you don't need to understand everything, and you have strategies and ways in which you can guess or determine like the meaning of vocabulary and structures you are not that familiar with. So definitely something to be practicing while you are learning the language, so you come to the exam with those strategies already. We also received a lot of questions about how and what you should be studying the weeks before the exam. And this is, I think, very common, right? We have little time before the exam. And we have the impression that we need to study everything that we have been studying for the last 1 or 2 years, and we have to do it in 3 weeks. It is obviously not possible. So how can we structure the time that we've got, and how can we plan our study efficiently? First thing I would say is revisit the work you've done, the texts that you have written, the reading and the listening activities that you've been doing, and have a look at the feedback. Okay. That will help you identify your priorities, the aspects that you need to work on, perhaps more intensely, and also the parts that you have been doing well. So these are your strengths. So when you have that, think also about how you feel about it, right? If you feel very, very nervous, or if you are hopeful, if you think you will do well, and what you think you need. Okay, so I think I need more practice coming up with fillers and other phrases to buy time while I'm speaking, like, okay, let me see, that's a good question, and so on. So you know that this is one of the areas that you need to work on, and you can ask your teacher for practice with that. But the important thing is that you identify the areas where you want to improve, and based on that, you can create an action plan. Your teacher will probably have created an action plan for you as a class with the main challenges that you have had throughout the year. Don't think that it is always going to be something very big, a very big task. It could be also little things like making sure you know the basics of the exam, right? So when is the exam? What time do you have to be there, and where it is taking place, right? So it is a combination, I think, of bigger and smaller things. To complement the action plan that is done as a group, as a class, you can have your own personal action plan with things that you feel that are important to you and that will make a difference on exam day. And we had yesterday, and I think we had today also, someone who was going to see the exam like tomorrow. So David gave a very good, I think, piece of advice, which was like try to relax, right, and try to
Yeah.
go to bed early so you feel rested, no,
I would
tomorrow.
I would I would suggest that it's best not to do too much intense preparation on the day before the exam.
Hmm.
Read through your vocabulary, maybe look at a couple of reading exercises or watch a video of a speaking test or something like that.
Hmm.
The important thing is to relax and clear your mind a little bit. And I always say go to bed early. I sound like a grumpy father, but um get some rest. Make sure that you're fully rested and refreshed in the morning. It'll do you much more good than doing another exercise.
Yeah, and as with everything, it's just like finding you what works for you, no? The strategy
Mm,
that works for you. Because I remember that for me, what really worked was to read something in English, just to get my brain like working in English and starting to, produce
yeah,
English. And that I found very, very helpful. So it is something that I still do when I have a presentation or something that I want to do well. I always like take some time to read a text in English just to get on the mood.
yeah.
So it is
There's
just
something I do as well when well, not in English perhaps, but I remember I was working on a project with the French ministry. And before I had a meeting with the people from the French ministry, I always made sure that I spent that morning listening to TV in French or radio in French just to get my ear attuned. It's a good idea, particularly if you're just going into your speaking test.
mm,
Make sure you speak English before you go into the speaking test, so you're not switching from your native language to English on as you go through the door. You're already attuned.
mhm. And once you have your plan, as I said, like maybe check with your teacher, maybe check with your classmates too, to see if it is feasible, if you have enough time to cover it or if it is too ambitious. And once you have it, commit to it, okay, stick to it and follow it. You have been asking about resources, and your teacher knows you very, very well, and they will be able to recommend the most suitable resources for you. But if you want, we are sharing also resources which are free and available on our website. But if you want to do something else, maybe you want to consider test and train. It is very, very flexible. You can choose the level you want to take, and also different durations, and you will have exam practice for you to do at your own pace. So something to consider maybe. More than anything, because it is produced by us, so you can be sure that it is at the right level of ability, because one of the questions that we received is that sometimes you have the impression that the material, the learning material, and then the real exam have a different level. Right. So in our case, because we are producing both, we can have the certainty that the exams and the exam material are at the right level of ability. But it is true that, it is an important exam. So there are different factors which can influence your perceptions, right? And you are not in a familiar context, in a familiar setting anymore. You are probably going into a big room with different candidates, and that can make an impression on you. It is also the real exam, so you don't have another opportunity. That also makes you doubt more and maybe feel a bit more nervous and anxious about it. So it is important to understand what is causing those perceptions and try to find solutions, right? So if you feel that, the listening exam or the listening is you have the impression that it is more difficult, well, maybe you want to explore the option of going for a session with headphones, for example. Or if you feel that you do better on a computer, why don't you go for a digital version of the exam? And then just remember that in life you will have to face stressful situations like a job interview or a very important exam. So it is important also that you learn to manage your emotions, and you have the support from your teacher, from your family, friends as well, so you can find the strategies to manage your emotions and be able to show your best ability in the exam. And there was also a question from you about the different exams and the different versions of the exams. So, for example, some of you may be about to sit B2 First for Schools, while others may have gone for B2 First. What is the difference between them? Well, I'm going to start with the similarities, right? Because they have the same level. They both assess B2 level of the CEFR. They have the same format and the same recognition. What does this mean? That with your certificates, doesn't matter if you have taken B2 First for Schools or B2 First, with your certificates, you will be able to go and show it to a university or to an employer, a company. You also may apply for Erasmus, right? So it has the same recognition because the certificate is the same. What is different is the topics. In the For Schools version, the topics are more suitable for school age learners. That is not making the exam easier or more difficult. Is remember that the level is exactly the same. There is also a difference in the text types for writing part 2 in B2 First for Schools. One of the options is a story, and in the B2 First, one of the options is a report. Apart from that, they are the same. There were also several questions about students with dyslexia, other type of situations, right? Which can be temporary or can be long term. It could also be a broken arm, right? So there are different options for you that we can offer. We call them access arrangements. And the link is already in the chat. Thank you to our colleagues. Please have a look at it and see what the options are for you. Okay, so you may need support from your teacher, your exam center to really understand what these adaptations mean on exam day. And make sure you ask any questions that you may have, and you have it very, very clear what the arrangements will mean for you to see if they are suitable.
I
David.
was just answering a question from Sarah,
Mhm.
Sarah Muhlenbach. Apologies for my German. She was just asking about is dyslexia taken into account when assessing writing? Um, we will allow certain access arrangements for students with dyslexia, so they can have extra time. They can use colored overlays. Our exams are always printed in using the Arial font, which is one of the fonts which is accepted as dyslexic friendly. So it's all of our exams to that extent are designed to help students with dyslexia. One thing we can't do is to change the way that we mark, because that goes beyond access arrangements. So we can't, for example, not take into account spelling, or the way that we mark writing is the same way as we mark everything, is we try to give positive credit for the things that people are able to do, rather than penalizing or taking marks away for bad spelling or for whatever. So as long as your spelling is understandable, it's possible that it won't be penalized. And the rest of the exam, obviously, that's writing. And the rest of the exam, there are plenty of marks to have for objective answers, so A, B, C, which would not discriminate against a student with dyslexia. I see somebody has found the reactions
Emojis,
button.
yes.
Yeah, you can have too many emojis.
Okay, moving on. Alejandra, we will talk about the word count and the limit of words. Just bear with us for a few minutes. We will come to that. Okay, nerves. More questions about nerves and how to overcome them. Well, I think it is very important that you trust your abilities. You have been learning English for a long time. You have studied hard. So trust that. Ask any questions you may have, because knowing what to expect will probably help with managing your emotions. Do exam practice. We've got sample tests available on our website. They can show you what will happen on exam day in terms of exam design. They also help you to manage your time, which is another very important aspect of taking an exam. And just think about everything you can do. I think David was mentioning before, right, that the way we assess is that we give credit, we reward like what you can show us that you can do.
Yeah,
So
that's
just
right.
focus on that. Okay. Moving on to key information about exam day. Um, because again, you were worried, you were interested in what will happen on exam day. You also asked a very specific question with capital letters that I am going to answer super quickly. So we give instructions in some tasks to use capital letters when you're writing your answers. This is because for that task, it is clearer and makes the processing of the exam easier. Okay. However, if you don't follow the instructions because you don't realize or for whatever reason, don't worry, because we will still mark the exam. Okay. So we mark everything you produce as long as it is in the answer sheet, right? So please follow the instructions. But if you don't worry, we will mark it. Okay, so that's, I hope that makes you feel better for those of you who were a bit concerned about that. In terms of the speaking exam, there will be two examiners. One will be the interlocutor, who will be interacting with the candidates, with you. And then the assessor, who is not taking part in the interaction, is observing, and both of them are marking. Usually our exams are done in pairs, but if there is an even number of candidates, there are only 3 candidates left in the session, and it's not possible to have 2 pairs, then you can do the exam in groups of 3. But don't worry, because the exam is adapted. So you have material for all of you. And also the duration of the exam is extended. So you have as much opportunity as any other students to show your abilities. If you want to find out more about the speaking exam or the written papers, please check the candidates booklets available on our website. You also have top tips for exam day. All this is available on our website, so it's really reliable, and we encourage you to have a look at it and become familiar with it before the exam. And with that, moving on to top tips to perform at your best. You had a lot of questions about speaking. I think some of them are also in the Q&A. So, David, this is now becoming a tradition. One big mistake to avoid in the speaking exam.
A big mistake to avoid both at B2 and C1. In fact, it's one of the things that makes a difference between a good B2, well, between B2 and C1. When you are interacting, so in part 3 of both exams, there is the collaborative task where you're supposed to talk together. And weaker students or students performing below the level will tend not to talk together. They'll tend to just take turns to say what they want to say without reacting to what somebody has just said to them. So as a rule, I would say always when you start your turn, make a comment about what the person who's talking to you has just said. Either some reaction, so that's a really good idea. I agree with you to some extent, but just something like that, just to link what they've said to what you're saying, and then maybe extend or give a contradiction to what they've said. So, if you disagree with them, then say why you disagree, and then go on to talk about what you want. If you agree with them, maybe add another reason for it being right. Um, just something to show that you've listened to the other person and that you add to what they say, because that's what we do when we talk to somebody. It's just natural conversation, and it's really important for an examiner to see that and see that you're listening to each other. Very important. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, David. In preparation, so with that tip in mind, try to engage with English as much as possible. I think this was something that we also mentioned in this morning session, right? That for you to be successful in the exam, you need to have the level, right? So you need to have the ability, the B2 ability or C1 ability, right? And this means that you are learning how to communicate. So you need to have that, and then you can become familiar with the exam. But it is important that you have that level. Try to speak as much as possible with different people, your teacher, your friends, classmates, so you can have different types of interaction. Use different or new vocabulary when you are speaking, so you can become more effective when you are communicating. And as always, revisit previous work and feedback so you can identify your strengths and areas of improvement. Then become familiar with the exam format so you know what to expect, and also with the assessment criteria so you know that there is more than grammar and vocabulary when it comes to speaking. Interaction plays a very, very important role, pronunciation, Try to watch speaking videos so you know what the candidates do in the exam and also how they are assessed, reading the examiner comments, and then ask your teacher and exam center if you have any questions. If you want to have a go and maybe you don't have many people to practice your speaking, you may want to try Speak and Improve. Okay, which is a tool that we have designed in Cambridge and can help you to, you know, become more fluent and be a bit more confident when speaking. In the exam, listen carefully, as David was saying, like listen to your partner so you see what their ideas are and you can react to them. Try to show all the English you know, so avoid one-word answers when possible. If you need to ask for repetition and clarification, by all means, we do that when we are also in our first language, when we are speaking in our first language. As David was saying, don't monopolize the conversation, interact with your partner. In the exam, you will have the time to talk to the examiner and then time to interact. Make sure, and then also time to talk on your own. So make sure you are making the most of the different opportunities to show different speaking skills. Remember that you are not assessed on your ideas and trust your preparation. In terms of writing, tips before the exam, very similar to the ones in speaking. It is another productive skill. So trying to access content in English, using new vocabulary when writing, becoming familiar with the exam and how it is assessed. For that, you can use Write and Improve to practice and get feedback, and also to become familiar with the exam. We've got the guides for assessing writing, which can also help you understand the assessment criteria better. And then when you are writing, please take the time to plan before you actually start writing. And there were a few questions about different text types in B2 First and B2 First for schools. It is very, very important that before you go on and choose one text type, for example, I'm going to write a report, or I'm going to write a story, report in B2 First and a story in B2 First for schools. Think about the text type and also think about the topic. Not because you need to have previous knowledge about the topic, but because maybe you know more vocabulary for one topic and you feel less comfortable with another topic, right? So I think they are both very important elements when choosing well what text type to write. And take time to plan what you want to write and to organize your ideas, because that will save actually some time when you are writing. Okay, so you don't have to write like a draft and then the actual final version, right? So take your time, don't rush, and write clearly so you don't have to write the text again. And take time to review. And for that, it's important that you are aware of the assessment criteria. So it's content. Have you covered all the content? Have you developed your ideas as you should? Communicative achievement. So does your text read as an essay, as an email, as an article? Are your ideas organized coherently? Do they flow? And also the language. There was a question about word count, which I haven't forgotten. And as you can see here in the criteria, there is no mention of word count, right? Because the word count there is a reference for you to know more or less how many words you have to write, how long your text should be. But we don't penalize. Again, we don't take marks away for writing too many words or too few words, right? It's just the impact that it can have on content, because if you're writing too many words, maybe it means that you're repeating ideas or adding information that is not relevant, and that can affect on content, or maybe if you are writing too few words, maybe you are not developing your ideas as you should, right? So I think it is a very important balance that you have to make there, but it's not the number of words that is going to impact your mark as such. Okay, so it's definitely not a good idea to be crossing out words at the very last minute or anything like that. We are going to mark everything that is on the piece of paper. David, anything to add before moving on to after exam day?
Not particularly, no.
Okay, so I can move
So
on,
I'm
and then
very busy in the chat in the Q&A, unfortunately.
I know. So
Lots of
that's
questions.
I want to leave a few minutes for questions, so I'm going to go quickly through this. Once you have taken the exam, please register in the results service for candidates. For that, you will need to use your confirmation of entry. This is a document that you receive when you register for our exams. It has all the exam information, the time of the exam, the place where you will sit the exam, and also it has your ID number and your secret number. With this information, with this data, you will be able to register in the results service for candidates, and then you will get a notification when your results become available. Okay, so it is very, very, very useful for you to have it. And please always keep the confirmation of entry because it is, again, it has important information about your exam. I saw a question in the chat, and we also received a question about certificates depending on the exam that you sit. So if you sit B2 first or B2 first for schools, and you do very, very well, and you show ability at C1, you will still receive a certificate for B2 first, because that is the exam you sat, okay, the exam you took. But your first certificate, your B2 first exam certificate will show grade A ability at C1. Okay, so is it a B2 first certificate? Yes. Is it a C1 advanced certificate? No, because you didn't take that exam. Okay, so it is a B2 first certificate showing that you demonstrated ability at C1. Okay, so please be aware of that and also take into account that the recognition is different or may be different for a B2 first certificate showing C1 ability and a C1 advanced certificate. Okay, so some institutions will want to see a C1 advanced certificate to certify C1 ability. Okay, so I hope that is clear. It is a bit difficult to explain, but basically you will get a certificate for the level that you have sat, for the exam that you have sat. And then you also asked us about the weighting of the different parts of the exam. All the different parts have an equal weight when it comes to the calculating the overall score. Okay, so it is exactly the same: listening, reading, writing, speaking, and use of English all have the same weight when it comes to the overall score. But you don't need to pass every part of the exam, okay, or every paper. You can maybe compensate, like having like a weaker performance in listening and a stronger performance in speaking. And just to finish, please check our recognition website, where you can see that our certificates are accepted by universities, companies, employers. So if you want to find out if this company you are interested in or that university in particular accept our exams, please check this website. And this takes us to the end. Please take some time to share your feedback. Also access the QR for the handout. And some time for questions, maybe, David. Anyone you want to answer?
Um, Sorry,
That's fine.
I was just typing one. Um, there's a lovely one here from Sofia Real de Asua. It says, do you take into account gesturing in the speaking? No. Body language is not, well, body language isn't marked in the speaking, but for example, if in the section where you're asked to talk together, if you just gently turn your chair to face the person you're speaking with, that shows the examiner that you understand the instruction and that you are going to talk together. You're not just going to say what you think. So that's quite a useful use of body language. It's not marked as such, but look at just gesture less, but eye contact definitely is important. Again, you wouldn't be given a mark for it, but it's just part of interacting with people, and it makes people feel more comfortable, I think.
Hmm.
There's
Um,
another one from Jocelyn. Is it possible to use some slang in the writing section? Uh, I think at B2 and C1, the use of slang would be very, very limited and almost always inappropriate. The language that you're supposed to be using particularly at C1, is quite often quite formal, and therefore there isn't space there for using slang.
hmm. Nafisa, apologies for the pronunciation of your name if it's incorrect, sorry. Was asking about habits, right, to move from B2 to C1. I don't know, David, if you have some strategy. I would say like try to engage with English in class, but also outside class. Try to have a variety of texts, oral or written, for you to use and check, because I think that your contact with English has to go beyond
Yeah,
what you're doing in class, and
definitely.
be super aware, right, of new structures, new vocabulary to communicate more
I
effectively.
I think that's again, you remember I was talking about that little notebook.
Mm,
Maybe have a section at the back for um, just little snips of language which you notice, which are which attract your attention, which you hadn't expected, or there's a different way of saying something which surprised you. Just make a note of these, and the more you listen to language and you become aware of how language is working, the more you will notice patterns and structures which you can then use. Until you notice something, you become consciously aware of something. You can't adopt it and you can't change it. So that's exactly the same if you have an error which you consistently make. You have to become aware. You have to notice that error. You have to understand why it's an error before you can correct it. And that's a big problem for a lot of people. They make the same mistake again and again and again. And I include myself in English and French and Spanish. I make the same mistakes all of the time. And until I notice a mistake, I can't correct it because you're not aware that you're doing it. In the same way, if you are listening to people speak or you're watching a video or you are reading a text or an article in a newspaper. Um, and you start to train yourself to notice turns of phrase or ways in which people say certain things. And maybe it's something that you notice again and again. That's something that you can start to introduce into your own language. And if you're consistently looking at material which is around the C1 level, you are training yourself to recognize what sort of language C1 level is, what sort of things people say, what sort of tricks people use linguistically. And once you start to notice them with a bit of practice, you can start to use them.
Hmm.
So it was very, very long, but
But very useful. Thank you. There was maybe just one final question about how to improve reading. I hope the strategies we mentioned before are useful, but I think that maybe the key is like to become aware of different reading sub skills and when to use which, when is the
yeah.
time to read quickly to get a general idea, when is the time to read quickly to get specific information or to see where the part of the text is covering the topic that you want to answer. And then when is the time to read a bit more slowly and more carefully to get all the information that you need. So I think that making that transition and being able to choose well is very important.
Yeah, that's right. You have to be able to move between different reading styles in the same exercise um, quite comfortably, I think, particularly at the C1 level. So you really do need to practice those. And it's something which you should, if you're a teacher, you
Mm.
should be dedicating time in class for. Because you can't practice that on your own in you can't practice that on your own at home. You will tend towards careful reading of the whole text. And you just can't do that in the exam. There's not time.
Mm-mm. I think we need to leave it here. I hope the session was useful. Best of luck if you're about to sit our B2 first for schools or C1 advanced. Thank you so much for all your questions and your interest. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you, our colleagues behind the scenes answering all the questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It's been lovely to have you, and thank you for so many questions. Sorry we couldn't get through them all, but tried. I hope
Thank
you've got
you.
some idea at least. Okay, bye bye.